East. Now, let's come back to Europe and to Davos, Ben. Ben, I do remember your name, actually, by the way, but go ahead.
Ben Rubin.
Yes.
'Tis I. Anyway, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's right, as Mike just said. The 54th meeting of the World Economic Forum convenes next week in Davos. This year, the agenda is focused on one thing and one thing alone. It is rebuilding trust. But why, I hear you ask, should trust need to be rebuilt? Let's hear from Penny Mordaunt.
Since the turn of the century, we've had our leaders rigging interest rates, laundering drug money, presided over an offshore banking system bigger than anyone thought possible, forced good companies into closure, and destroyed pension funds as they themselves grew wealthier. Collectively, they oversaw an unprecedented destruction of wealth and the collapse of the financial system. They watched as life savings placed into investment funds set up by leaders of previously unimpeachable integrity turned out to be Ponzi schemes. They sold off gold reserves to compensate for these exercises in corporate greed, while never once convicting a banker. Our spiritual leaders covered up sex abuse in the church. Our charity leaders sexually abused the vulnerable. Our child welfare leaders permitted child abuse. Our police leaders have allowed predators to wear a uniform. Leaders of the automotive industry lied about emissions, were imprisoned, fled the country while out on bail, and remain fugitives. Leaders of our water utilities polluted rivers and then covered it up. Global entertainment leaders have faced multiple allegations of sexual harassment and abuse. Britain's leading broadcaster falsely accused political figures of being child abusers whilst allowing actual abusers to commit crimes on their premises. Meanwhile, sporting leaders have been caught cheating and doping, human rights lawyers have been struck off for misconduct and dishonesty, and the offshore tax operation, thought to be a fraction of the UK economy, turned out to be a multiple of it.
Okay, quite a lot then to rebuild trust around. Now, what's that got to do with the World Economic Forum? Well, unfortunately, our leaders, as Mordaunt has just outlined, people who have committed all of those crimes, essentially, many of them are connected to the World Economic Forum. This is well known, not least through their Young Global Leaders program. You can go and look at all of the graduates from the Young Global Leaders program. If you go to the Malone Institute website and download this spreadsheet, you can see here, this is just one snapshot. There's about 5,500 names on here, not all from the UK, they're all around the world. But you can see 2 or 3 generations of senior British politicians, Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Gordon Brown, who flogged off the gold, Tony Blair and his mate William Hague, Charles Kennedy, David Lammy, Ed Balls, Yvette Cooper, Chuka Umunna, remember him? He was going to be the British Obama, apparently, for about 5 minutes. They were all in charge while all of those things happened. And the World Economic Forum continues to churn out young global leaders. So McKinsey asked them, some of them, the more recent ones and the lesser known ones, what to expect from Davos 2024. And they were all predictably on message. AI is the big theme, but they also touched on climate action and adaptation, intersectionality, reasserting international law and order. Actually, one of them spoke about the new world order, actually used those words, the importance of protecting and reinforcing democracy. And my particular favorite, the idea of what does DEI mean when we have access to genetic engineering? That is a big question. McKinsey are one of the strategic partners of the World Economic Forum. They're the big global consulting firm. They're front and center with a lot of the messaging. They've been working directly with Klaus Schwab to set out the strategic context for next week's event. They've issued 2 reports in the past week. The first is this one, Global Risks Report for 2024. This is a survey of 1,500 global experts, mainly sourced from the World Economic Forum community, includes input from a bunch of insurers, big insurance companies, and they're looking over the 1, 2, and 10-year horizons at different geopolitical risks. They basically describe the world as a series of crises. We have a poly crisis across pretty much every area of society. The most immediate one in this election year is misinformation and disinformation. The idea that as polarization grows and technological risks remain unchecked, truth will come under pressure. In the long term, the 10-year view, it's all about the environment, the idea that the environment is going to hit a point of no return. We've heard a lot about that over the past month with COP and all of the other activity around that. And two other big risks around the economic strains on low and middle income people and countries, not the wealthy, interestingly, they don't talk about them. And also the ideological and geoeconomic divides that will disrupt the future of governance if the West doesn't get its way. The second report, as I said, there were two big strategic reports issued this week. The second one is this, the Global Cooperation Barometer. So obviously we have all these risks. How are we going to manage and mitigate them? Well, we need to cooperate. We need to collaborate. And that's global governance and global business. That is the dictionary definition of fascism, the integration of the markets and the state. There are five big themes here. So trade and capital, innovation and technology, climate and natural capital, health and wellness, peace and security. This draws inspiration from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the efforts of lots of other global institutions. It opens with this wonderful chart. So you apparently can reduce global collaboration down to this blue line. So global collaboration at the moment is just under 1. This is just classic management consulting. This is abstraction to the point of absurdity. Right, so we can drill down a little bit and get a bit more detail across each of those 5 themes, and we can see that all of the lines are going up in the right direction as they're supposed to, I suppose. Apart from peace and security, which has been going down since 2020, that yellow line is obviously the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, and now in Yemen, and whatever comes next, right? So this is the view from the control tower. All of that geopolitical mess, they have reduced down to a few colourful lines on a chart, and that's what they're using to guide a lot of their conversation. Over to you, Debbie.
Well, just before we move on to Debbie, I just want to raise this with you, Ben, because obviously number 1 on the 2-year risk chart there was misinformation and disinformation. We're going to be talking about that in a couple of minutes with just after the break. But generative AI was what they were talking about. And it's fascinating to me how themes run across different agencies and different institutions. So generative AI and misinformation and disinformation are a key theme of Davos this year, or at least the Global Risk Report anyway. And that is something that we're seeing in the news media as well. That must be just a coincidence.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist. So, yeah, I think it's probably a coincidence.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So